Good afternoon, everybody, and I am so sorry for the technical hitches we had this morning. Well, morning for me, afternoon for you, so earlier today. Anyway, I've recorded this video so that you can catch up with what was in the lecture, and I hope you are able to watch this. This is lecture 4, and we will be doing the workshop next week. So if you can catch up with this lecture before next week, that would be good. That's great. So hello from across the miles, from Southend-on-Sea to you in India, and I hope everything is good with you and your families. So let's get started. Today's lecture is about generating ideas. So when we say generating ideas, in design thinking there is actually a name for it, a name in the process which is called IDEATE. So where does this IDEATE session fit in with everything that we've done so far? So first of all, we're looking at design thinking, the overall view, and saying that you have to start with a beginner's mindset. Then we looked at empathy and understanding and how to make sure that you develop a human-centered approach. And then problem framing was last week's lecture, and that is what we will be doing this week in terms of our workshop. So problem framing is defining problem statements, and if you remember, we looked at points of view statements and how might we statements. And now we come to generating ideas. So from the problem statements, generating ideas, the IDEATE session. And how does it fit in with the design thinking system? Well, the first stage is empathize. The second is define, which is the problem statement. Stage 3 is ideate. And then stage 4 is going on to prototype some of your solutions and then test. So the workshop that we will work with, that goes with this lecture, will be next week, and we will be generating ideas, but we will have tools for this. So today is just an IDEATE overview, and I have 3 videos for you to watch. And I shall just recap at the end. So this is really an overview of what the IDEATE part of the process is all about. And we've got a couple of examples to look at and 3 videos to watch. Now, if you remember, we have visited this design graphic before, and IDEATE is in the middle of the process. So as I've said before, and I hope you recall, that the design thinking process is not a straight line. It is iterative, meaning you go backwards and forwards. So as you can see from this particular diagram, we're going backwards and forwards. So it has a position in the whole process, but we might go backwards or forwards from it. Okay, so what does IDEATE mean? Once you have understood people-centered perspectives, that's empathized, and defined the problem, then you need to explore a wide variety of approaches addressing the problem. So we do mean, when we say wide variety, we mean a wide variety and a quantity of solutions and many perspectives. So you need to generate radical design alternatives. It's a process of going wide in terms of concepts and outcome. It flares, you know, like a flame that once it sparks, it flares up, right? So IDEATE flares rather than focuses in. because what we want to do is to gain and create as many ideas as possible. The goal of ideation is to explore a wide solution space, both in quantity of ideas and in the diversity of ideas. And here, the thinking about disruptive technologies and how new technologies can apply to possible solutions that we're thinking about really comes into this stage here. And above all, it's a form of brainstorming. So now let's have a look at our first video, which introduces the whole section of IDEATE.
The next step in the design thinking process is my personal favorite, IDEATE. Coming up with as many ideas or solutions to a problem as you possibly can. So let's talk about the different ways we approach ideation in the design thinking method. 1, we want quantity. 2, we want a diversity of ideas or solutions, and it's all about generation, generating quantity and diversity. So we want to keep in mind in this process that it's quantity, not quality, that we're going for at first. We can determine quality later. The getting as many ideas out at the beginning is the critical part. And for that, we have to suspend judgment. And suspending judgment not only of our own ideas, but of other people's ideas, right? Just get them out on the table. In this process, you want to make sure that all the people that are collaborating and working in this process have a voice at the table. There are generally introverts in the room, and what you want to do is you want to come up with workshops or exercises within this process that helps them get their ideas and their voice on the table when they might not normally speak, and there's lots of great ways to do that. So you want to make sure that everybody is heard because everybody has ideas. Now here's the critical point. The toughest point is that we want to focus on novelty over relevance in the ideation process. Now you're probably thinking, well, if it's not relevant, what good will it do? From my experience in decades in the design industry, relevance is something that people do really, really well. You know, the relevant spreadsheet, the relevant, brochure, the relevant response to something. That's something that we operate out of constantly. It's the novelty that is difficult for most of us. And getting novel thinking, novel ideas out is the most important part. If we have novel ideas, and I always use the analogy of some of the products that Apple has created, who knew we needed the iPod, right? Who knew we needed the iPhone? Those were novel solutions, but were also relevant. And there's the sweet spot. I could do a whole talk just on novelty and relevance, but there's the sweet spot between novelty and relevance, and that's where we innovate. This we do really, really well. So in the ideation phase, we need to focus on novelty. Some of the ways, some of the methods and processes that we use in the ideation phase are mind maps, sketches, skits, storyboards, game storming. This is really great, and there's some great books out on this. Charrettes, where we actually bring in the users of our products to ideate with us. So this is just a few of the possible methods that we can use in this step of the process. But in a nutshell, this is ideation, and you always want to shoot for novelty first. No judgment, just novelty.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I rather like this. I mean, I like the way that she says It's about novel, new ideas. It's not just about relevant ideas. So, yes, the solutions have to be relevant, but we have to think outside the box. We need a wow factor. So, for example, she takes iPhones. She said, "Who knew we needed an iPhone before they came out?" Because it was a completely novel and different idea. Having a smartphone, they didn't exist before. So that was novel and relevant, and that's what we need. So, what does IDEATE imply? Well, let's take India as an example and look at Indian infrastructure. India has the worst record for casualties and fatalities in the world in both absolute and relative terms. So, how can this situation be improved? So, in IDEATE terms, we might say, how might we improve the situation in India? How can we improve the situation? So there's many ideas that we can come up with, but what is the problem that we're trying to solve? And we need to generate as many possible solutions for as many possible problems to really brainstorm this idea. So, for example, is it a problem of driving skills or driving discipline? Is it a problem of too many vehicles or types of vehicles, such as cycles, scooters, tractors, and all sorts that use the road? Is it a problem of road design and infrastructure layout? Is it a problem of roadworks, repairs, and maintenance? So all these things so far, they take different approaches of looking at how to solve or how to come up with a solution. So what else? Is it an engineering problem? Do cars and vehicles need redesigning? Is it a policing, monitoring and enforcement problem? Or what about pedestrians, cattle, stray dogs and roadside activities? Are these things that we need to find solutions for? Could emergency services be more efficient? So can you see there's many strands and threads to looking at improving the solution for Indian infrastructure? It could be any of these, or it could be all of these. So what do we need to do? Well, we need engagement with stakeholders, because that would help us define the problem, and consultation could help identify the approaches that could contribute to a solution. But what about the cost? So whenever we are looking at creating ideas and then turning those into prototypes, which is the next step, we need to look at the cost. Now, if you remember, we have already talked about that some solutions aren't worth doing because the value that they generate isn't worth the effort. So this is the time to evaluate the value. So each option entails costs and benefits in both financial and non-financial terms. One objective could be to maximize benefits at low cost. Another could be to prioritize impact in a short period of time. Yet another perspective could be to use this problem to create better public transport facilities. So can you already see that these cost benefit analysis for the solutions already are taking us down different approaches and generating different ideas of value? So we shouldn't forget that some things would be long-term objectives, like better road layouts, signage and pavement designs. There might be legal provisions that have to be adapted. For example, laws about how you drive on the road. I always remember when I was young and I used to go to Italy, my God, was it noisy because everybody used to toot their horns. But you go to Italy these days and very few people sound their horns. So it's a much different driving experience these days than many years ago. But that took legislation. Also, we need to think about organizational and institutional capacity. How do these need to be evaluated to consider which options are practical? And an ideal situation for new technologies, perhaps. How could artificial intelligence help? But better and safer driving conditions could actually increase the number of cars and vehicles on the road. So, for example, we know in Britain, if we have traffic jams through villages and small towns, as soon as they start, or as soon as they've created a bypass or a new motorway to make people's journeys quicker, and the traffic flow better, we know there's more traffic on the road. So our success becomes not such a success because more traffic gets on the road and creates another type of traffic jam. So we can be a victim of success. So let's have a look now at prototype development. So what does this mean? Well, all we're saying is that from stage 3, which we're in now, which is IDEATE, coming up with multiple ideas for solutions. The next stage is developing a prototype, which we then would need to test. So stage 3 becomes the basis for stage 4. And the more options that can be explored in stage 3, the more prototypes can be developed in stage 4. So flaring and widening are thus essential to developing options, and that's what we're going to do in workshop 4. So we'll be using tools which will apply these approaches. So in order to progress to stage 4, we need to understand cost, organizational and time implications of each option, because we need to understand fees, charges, taxes that have to be raised, and the resources that need to be used to create each of the options. And we won't do all the options. We will do the options that create probably the best value. But we need to understand what the real criteria is for making the decision. And we need to also look at disruptive technologies in design thinking to understand how the technologies of the future will impact the solutions that we are currently exploring, because they need to match. They definitely need to go hand in glove. Especially during the phase of converting ideas into prototypes. So both the technology and the solution need to be relevant for tomorrow's world. So can we learn from others? Yes, of course. So most governments and corporates borrow ideas from projects, experiences from around the world. But not only should we learn what's good, but we need to take into account what didn't work and learn lessons from other people. So let's take the example of an airport design. You'd think that was pretty simple, wouldn't you? Because an airport's an airport and we all know what it does. But there are many layers and complexities in airport design. So for example, airports and the service they provide provide would appear to be fairly standard, but each airport has to be adapted for the geography and climate of each location. The culture, behaviour and preferences of users can differ significantly. Catering, commercial and other activities can call for different approaches. Airport access by car, metro, bus or rail can significantly alter airport layout and facilities, especially if you are trying to develop or expand an existing airport which is already in a very built up area. It's great designing an airport which is outside a city and you've got no restrictions, but that doesn't often happen. So security requirements can differ radically. Anybody that might have travelled through Turkey or Israel or going into the United States will know how vastly different going through security is for those airports compared with, I don't know, going into Finland, for example. Airports typically service passenger and freight traffic, but this is variable. So Southend-on-Sea, for example, does have an airport, but more freight travels from it than passengers. Airports can incorporate domestic and international facilities, and airport transfers and transit facilities have to be incorporated. But also, if you have international facilities, then you've got to have customs and migration facilities, and this can affect passenger flow through the airport and times of transit. Some airports serve as hubs for airline companies and even for servicing and maintenance. So what looks like a fairly standard model still needs extensive local consultation to create a facility that is genuinely people-centred. Now, we've got big airports around the world, but the biggest airports around the world aren't people-centred and they often get a bad press. So poor reputations include London Heathrow, Berlin, JFK in New York, Chicago O'Hare, LHX and Munich. So these are big airports, but they don't serve their passengers well. So not a great deal of satisfaction there. So what about other experiences? What can we learn and how can things differ? So models taken from advanced countries where road users and vehicles are strictly controlled could be the experience that we wish to model in India, for example. So we can say in Great Britain, vehicles are strictly controlled, and so are road users. So this helps to limit accidents. So road alignments and bypasses of villages and small towns, so you do not have so much traffic going through built up areas. So traffic is taken away from built up areas, so there's less risk of accident. But if we are building motorways and bypasses, we have to think about petrol and service stations. So they have to be integrated into the design. And driving discipline and driving skills need to be at a higher level if you are getting people to drive on motorways. So for example, in the UK, people who are learning to drive may not drive on motorways, and people who've just passed their driving test are not allowed to drive on motorways until they've done their provisional 1 or 2 years. So they need to get driving experience before they're allowed to use motorways, because we see that motorway driving is an advanced skill. So what about major airports? What lessons can we take from other places? So airport design and development integrates huge facilities and serve as airline hubs, transit centres for both freight and passengers, and we need to be aware of that. The world's largest airports, Chicago, LHS, London, Atlanta, Paris, struggle with very poor customer and user satisfaction. It's because they are so vast and they're international. So as people are flying in, you know, the customs, the immigration, and the security, all of this takes a long time. And it doesn't matter how big or small an airport, small disruptions, whether it's the weather, security, IT, or anything, can cause huge disruption. And mid-size airports seem to be more people-centered. So I can vouch for Finnish airports. I think they're wonderful. They're quite lovely places to be and very restful. So compared with the big international ones I usually fly through. Okay, so for our next video, I've called it Applying How Might We statements, but it's really a case of brainstorming.
All right, team. Thanks for coming for a brainstorm today. We have a really interesting topic. The local zoo, the visitors are down 20%. So how might we boost the number of visitors to the zoo? This is a serious problem for them. They want to stay open. They need more funding, all this kind of good stuff. So let's spend a few moments now first and get a few ideas down. Remember, we're going for quantity. Let's see how many ideas we can get. And also, there's so many good ideas out there. Let's push ourselves, try to get closer to the ridiculous. That might be brilliant. All right, so I'll start us off. I had date night. So, and you might hang out with the animals that are in action, if you know what I mean. All right, what else? What else you got? Oh yeah, what do you got?
What if we do a dress up like your favorite animal day? So it's like a costume theme thing.
Very cool.
What about zoo pop-up at places that kids frequent, the mall, school, parks?
Home Depot I know has programs for little kids to build, like, you know, birdhouses and stuff like that. So it could be all these different crafts, but they're sort of animal lessons, so
Love
kids
it,
learn.
love
And
it. I have a night camping, so you get to camp overnight there. So let's get a 5 or 10 more.
So I figure loyalty cards work for airlines and for burritos, so why not have it work for the zoo?
Building off the whole celebrity thing, what if like we pretend that animals are celebrities and we give out like a gossip magazine as an advertisement?
So for an hour every day, they vacate the cages, and you get to go swing on the bars and everything that the monkeys have. So it's zoo turn playground.
That's awesome.
What we'll do next is we'll look at these and look for some themes and cluster a couple. And then I think we should even prototype 1 or 2 of these and then take them over to the zoo. It's going to be great. A lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
nice.
So let's have a look at applying a beginner's mindset. How does that become relevant for the IDEATE stage? Well, I said before, whenever we try and find solutions, because we're human beings, we always try to jump to a solution first. And also, when we're doing that, we have preconceived ideas, assumptions, and biases. And we need to get rid of those and clear our minds of these personal beliefs, because they can limit empathy, problem definition, and ideas. So how to achieve a beginner's mindset and apply it to the ideas stage? Well, what we have to acknowledge is what works elsewhere may not work here, but it might. But even if the whole approach doesn't, there can be times when parts of the approach are great and will work for us. So we need to consider ideas from elsewhere, but have an open mind as to what might work and what might not. We need to have a people-centered approach which will help shape options and ideas. Bear in mind, people and their preferences differ around the world and within countries. So there are geographical, national cultural divides that will very much alter things. For example, in an airport, I know when I travel to India, I travel to Turkey. When you go to the restaurant, when you go to the airports, the restaurants are full of proper eating places which serve affordable food. Well, if you want affordable food in an airport in the UK, you need to buy sandwiches off the shelf because the restaurants that they have tend to be expensive. And of course, queuing up for security, etc. And it's not only the cultural differences we have in terms of catering, weather and climate can make an awful lot of difference at different times of the year about how an airport operates. So bad ideas and options can be eliminated during the prototype and testing phases. So be bold, nothing is wasted. So if somebody comes up with an idea which is about wow, or should I say a bit wacky, don't be judgmental. Put it into the prototype stage if you think you've got the resources, and try it out. For all you know, it might work. I mean, who came up with the Apple iPhone? Somebody put it into the prototype stage and got it tested, and it was found to be, wow, we like this. This is different. So you never know what wacky idea might actually work. Facilities and systems need constant updating and modernization. So, for example, when you are creating ideas for solutions, you also need to think about the processes and systems that already exist with your client so that they integrate. So this is very much an iterative process, again going backwards and forwards, from defining the problem to looking forward to prototyping. So don't expect to get it all right straight at once. You need to go backwards and forwards in the process. So let's have a look at our next video, which explains ideation.
Ideation is the stage of the process where the team's focus shifts from understanding the challenge to imagining possible solutions. Before they begin, the team uses insights derived from their field research to craft some user-centered "how might we" questions. These questions will help them focus their brainstorming efforts on opportunity areas they now know are really important to users. There are countless different ways to generate ideas. Team members who are physically co-located can always get together to run a quick in-person brainstorm using trusty whiteboards and sticky notes for the rest of the distributed team to see. But for teams who work remotely from one another, collaborating together using video calls and virtual whiteboards is a great way to create lots of energy and move your brainstorm online. With virtual brainstorming, you can invite anyone to participate. This injects some helpful diversity into ideation efforts, which goes a long way towards generating new and truly novel ideas that the team may not have arrived at on their own. Importantly, teams that allow time for asynchronous working, where individuals have some time to reflect and generate ideas independently from the team, consistently see an increase in the variety of ideas submitted, and very often in the quality of the resulting solutions. Regardless of whether ideation is happening completely online, synchronously or asynchronously, certain rules apply. Teams are in search of exciting ideas, not just feasible ones. They're using visuals to bring ideas to life, and they're supporting, not judging, no matter what.
So again, this video really emphasizes that we need some wow factor, something different. We're not just looking for relevant and appropriate solutions. We're looking for new, novel ideas. So as many people as you can, speaking to as many stakeholders as you can, getting as many perspectives as you can in the empathize stage, to help define the problem and create points of view statements, which then allows you to generate as many different solutions as you can. And this is what we need before we go into the prototype phase. So let's just consolidate with what we've done. In this lecture, we've covered an overview of the ideation stage, saying that we need to have many perspectives and a quantity of solutions to resource test or do the financial test on, and from which we can gather just a few to take into the prototype stage. And if you remember when we watched the zoo brainstorming, at the end of it, the boss said, okay, now let's put these into clusters and take a couple of the clusters of ideas to the zoo to find out what the client thinks. So that's the whole idea of ideation, getting or creating many ideas that we then cluster into groups, look at the groups, test them for financial viability, resource viability, and then choose some of those clusters to talk to the client about, see which ones they like, and then we'll take some of those into the next stage, stage 4, for prototyping. And this is how prototype development comes. And then we create the prototypes, which we then test. We also looked at the fact that we need to apply a beginner's mindset, because assumptions, personal beliefs, biases can cloud our judgment. So we're looking for wow and wacky ideas, and do not use judgment. Do not think that's stupid. Suspend all judgment until lots of ideas have been created and you're looking towards which ones are we going to take into the prototype stage. So next workshop, which will be next week, we're going to be looking at ideating and the tools that we use to ideate, and we'll use the Indian infrastructure that we talked about earlier in this session as the case study. So I hope you will be enjoying that. But as we leave today and think about next week, there's things for you to think about. You want to think about how design thinking and disruptive technologies can address the infrastructure issues that currently face India. So can artificial intelligence help with this? How can you empathize with the users, and which users are you going to be talking to? So we had the vehicles, we had the pedestrians, people pulling carts, people who had cattle, you know, and what are some of the ways to define a problem statement driven by empathy? So also think about ways that you can generate design alternatives to address covering social and physical infrastructure in India. And apart from the roads, we will be considering a social infrastructure project like a school or hospital, and a physical infrastructure project like an airport or a railway station. Now, I say we will be considering, it is we, it's not me. You're not going to have me as a talking head for the workshop. So I hope you will be all prepared to get pens and paper out and start thinking about some solutions. And we will be brainstorming with reference to stage 3, which is ideas. So all that's left for me today is to say thank you very much. Your bibliographic reference list is at the end of the PowerPoint presentations that you can access. So these are all the references for the case studies we use and for the videos that we use. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you've learned something from today, that you've enjoyed the videos, and that you are prepared to ideate next week. However, I look forward to seeing you later on this week when we'll be talking about problem solving and points of view statements, and we'll be doing a workshop on that. So thank you very much indeed. Take care. Bye-bye.